All right, man. So we got some absolutely huge news here for Kamala Harris, as well as for the Senate. So there's also a chance that the Democrats can actually manage to win a trifecta. There's also some really close scenarios we have where there are possible ties. And so there are some possibilities where it ends up being 269, 269. But because the Republicans control 26 of the states, we would end up losing the ability to get the presidency. So 269, 269 is an L. So even one electoral vote, for example, could flip this. So we could check this out here. We got this Nebraska poll out, this brand new poll. It's from a really high-rated pollster, SurveyUSA. So it says new general election poll in Nebraska. Trump has 54%, Harris has 37%. So I know you're thinking like, hey, what the hell? Like, I thought this was supposed to be good news for Kamala Harris, right? But what we can see here is it says hashtag NEO2, Nebraska's 2nd district. So they split their electoral votes. So right now she's actually leading the polls 47 to 42 in the 2nd district of Nebraska. This comes from SurveyUSA. It's an A-rated pollster, 1293 registered voters, dated 8/27, so it's pretty fresh off the presses. And so she's actually leading in NEO2, which is absolutely huge because that 1 point can actually be really, really important when it comes to being able to break a tie or being able to win. So I can kind of go over some of these scenarios for you guys. But here, if we go to this electoral map, so what's kind of going on here is we can see if we have this strategy where Kamala Harris wins all of the MIWI Penn states, she loses Nevada, AZ, GA, and NC. So she loses all of the Sun Belt states, right? And NV, which I think it's impossible, but we're just, teasing with hypotheticals. I think this outcome is close to impossible. But what's likely to happen in this scenario is ME2 is likely going to go red. According to history, I think it's been lost by like 7 points each time. Although there is some interesting data to look at. We're going to kind of discuss this situation as well because there's some interesting scenarios where ME2 goes blue. But what you can see here is in this scenario, it's 270 to 268, which narrowly misses that. I call it a fucked tie. So the fucked tie is called when it's 269, 269, right? Because then it's a tie and you lose, right? So what we have here is NE2 going blue would actually turn the tides in favor of the Democrats. If NE2 goes red in this case, with ME2 going red, you would end up losing the election. You would get a fucked tie, which is 269, 269. But if NE2 turns blue, then you have 270 to 268. And so it's not entirely impossible because Nevada's polling, I think it's lagging, and I think the fundamentals, I think Kamala ends up winning. But, let's just say the polls are correct, right? It's a situation, and then AZ, GA, NC, they're kind of on the margins as of right now. But, let's just say it happens, right? And then, MIWI Penn ends up going blue. This is what would end up happening. Now, there's a couple of other scenarios as well here that could come out to play where if we were to say that ME2 goes blue, which looks kind of unlikely because we can see these main 2nd district polls. There's a couple of new main 2nd district polls that have come out. 2 of them from the University of New Hampshire Survey Center. They have Harris +5 in both of them. So she is leading in the polls, but it does look like it's probably unlikely because back in the 2020 election, we can see Biden was actually up 2.8 points in the election for MEO2. But, Harris is kind of up more than this in these polls here. And then, I don't know if we can find any. Doesn't look like we have any of the same pollster. But, Biden not up as much in all these polls. So maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something different. But in a situation where this does end up happening, where somehow kind of magically it ends up turning out to be, a blue situation, it would be pretty interesting because it opens up more possible opportunities here. Because what you would end up having here is potential scenarios such as, for example, GA, AZ, and NC all go blue, right? And then what you could end up happening is all these go red, and you end up winning a 270 to 268, all because NE2 went blue. So there's another circumstance where this ends up popping off. Another scenario would be NV, AZ, Wisconsin, and then NC going blue. This would also put you in a situation where if you're able to pick up NE2, you're also able to win the election by flipping a tie. Another situation, if NV, AZ, and GA all go blue, what you can have is another situation where you're able to, get rid of this situation, although it looks like this must be I think, missing something here. So maybe it's the Wisconsin numbers here as well. So, yeah, so it's the Wisconsin number here as well because you could flop NC and GA because they have the same amount. Again, this relies on the unlikely event where ME2 actually ends up going blue. It's unlikely for sure. But, you know, if it does end up happening, these bring you more circumstances. But the main situation that could end up happening potentially is you lose NV and all of the Sun Belt states, and then you end up winning out the Rust Belt entirely. In that scenario, you could actually have a situation where you end up winning just off the back of any two going blue, right? So this would be absolutely massive, where you end up barely winning this out. This could happen. I think it's unlikely, but, you know, it's a possibility out there. It's a possibility that's out there. Now, we also have another really, really big thing coming out here as well. There's another poll coming here. We've been keeping an eye on this. I did promise to cover the Senate elections as well as like the House and everything. So we could see here is a Senate poll from Nebraska. So there's actually 3 ways for us to be able to retain the Senate. So the 3 ways are, what you can have is, you can have, if we pull up these Senate numbers, we can check the Senate mapping and kind of look at what that looks like here. So in the Senate mapping, we can see is, there's 3 possible ways to be able to do this, to be able to hit the 50 number. Again, this presuming that, you know, Kamala Harris is able to, you know, win the election, because then all you need is 50, because then Tim Walz is just going to be the guy who's the tiebreaker. So you could either have Montana go blue, in which case you would have, you know, the situation where you get 50 seats. John Tester is currently the incumbent there, so he would just have to hold his seat. Another route to being able to do this would be, if you get Nebraska to go blue, would be another route where Osborn ends up winning. And the other one would be if Allred wins the election against Ted Cruz and he's able to win the seat in Texas. That would be another way for able to get 50 seats. So there's actually 3 pathways to holding the Senate. These are all 3 possible ways to do so. So here are all different ways that you would actually be able to do this. And so this is huge, because we got this big poll dropping here where it actually tells us that, you know, Fischer is only up 1 in this poll. She's only up 1. Deb Fischer is only up by 1 point, which is absolutely massive. Osborn down 1. Now, the interesting thing about Dan Osborn, though, is he's actually currently an independent who spurned the Democratic Party. And so all the independents right now are actually de jure independents, but de facto Democrats. They're quote-unquote independents who caucus with Democrats, right? They caucus with them. The other situation here, though, is he spurned the Democratic Party and turned them away. So you'd have to hope that if he wins, he would actually be down to caucus with the Democratic Party. And there's actually a solid chance that what ends up happening is you end up having a scenario where if he wins, it's actually going to determine who has majoritarian rule. And so it might end up actually creating like history where you might have somebody who's an independent who's actually going to determine the sort of outcome, right? So it ends up potentially being this really crazy scenario. I don't know if that's ever happened before, where you have an independent who has to decide which party he's going to caucus with, actually determining the majority party control for the Senate. So really, really huge news in terms, she's only up by 1. There's a lot of people who don't have an opinion here. And then this is the first poll to come out from the Nebraska Senate race that's actually nonpartisan. So there's a lot of partisan-sponsored polls coming out. So if we look at the Senate polls for Nebraska, what we're able to see is we can see the 2024 numbers here. In Dan Osborn's polls, where he's sponsoring the numbers, you have Osborn. Fischer's only up 2. In the other Osborn poll, it's even. Fischer's up 4 in the other Osborn poll. In the Deb Fischer poll, suspiciously, she's up 26. And then the Nebraska Railroads for Public Safety sponsored poll, he's up 2. But this is the first poll that we have in the race that's actually nonpartisan sponsored. So, and this seat could legitimately determine the election for the Senate control. So absolutely massive. Also, the NE2 numbers are looking good for Kamala Harris right now in terms of it could end up being the tiebreaker here. That could end up winning her the election to prevent the fuck tie where you're 269. In the case where you win me pen and you lose everything else. Everything else is lost, including ME2. If you win ME2 somehow by magic, and magic maybe is possible, there's actually a bunch more tie scenarios that it ends up breaking. There's 3 of them that I'm aware of that I showed you guys. And so these are really, really big news for Kamala Harris. And then also maybe there's some kind of extrapolation that you could pull from this of like, hey, man, she's doing well, etc. And so that could end up playing a bigger role too. But really, really good news here for Kamala Harris coming in from some new poll numbers.